Welcome to The Professors on WNHU West Haven, 88.7 FM every Friday morning from 11 to noon, broadcasting from the campus of the University of New Haven. The professors are David Morris, Professor of Marketing and International Business at the University of New Haven, and Joel Marks, yours truly, Professor of Philosophy at the University of New Haven. And we are very honored today to have as our special guest Tinatin Khidasheli, who is from the country of Georgia. Welcome to the professors, Tina.
Thank you very much.
And you are the president of the Georgian Young Lawyers Association, visiting Yale University this year as a World Fellow. And you are a human rights, what should I say, activist?
Yeah, lawyer.
A lawyer.
Activist.
And you actually have served some role, perhaps prominent role, in the recent political revolution in your country. And I'm sure most of our listeners know very little, if anything, about that.
Including me.
So why don't you fill us in on some of the exciting recent history of your country of Georgia?
I'll be happy to do that. Well, yes, I come from Georgia, which is...
Could I just ask you some questions?
Sure.
Where is Georgia?
Right, that's what I was
all right.
planning to do now, and trying to put it in the most understandable
We have a map.
way.
We have a map here.
Great.
It's a very small country. It's a
Right.
country of 4.5 million people living in the Caucasus Mountains, which is at the Black Sea. It's there are lots of discussions whether it's Europe still or it's already in Asia, but it has one foot in Europe, another in Asia. We have Russia from the north and Turkey from the south, so it will make it easier to figure out where this country really is. And the Black Sea from the west, and Armenia and Azerbaijan from the east, which are smaller
Did you touch?
countries like
Does
us.
Georgia touch Azerbaijan?
Yeah.
It
We
does.
have
Because
borders
I was
with-
in Azerbaijan in Baku.
Baku.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
like-
we have borders with
Okay.
both of them.
All right. And there's some kind of a mountain range.
Yeah, we have Caucasus Mountains from the north, which is separating us, which is like geographical border between us and Russia.
Right.
So from Russian side, we have Chechnya, right, as an our border. on our
Chechnya
border.
touches your.
It's our
Georgia.
border,
It's your border.
all the way on our border with Russia. We have Chechnya.
All right. But when you say Russia, you mean Russia through Chechnya.
Right.
Is that what you're saying?
Right. Yeah. Well, it's still Russia.
Yeah. Right. I understand. No, I understand. I understand.
There's just,
Unfortunately for Chechens, but
there's just one pass through the mountains between Chechnya and Georgia.
Georgia, there is one official pass, but there are lots of other ways to go from Georgia through Chechnya and vice versa, which is the small ways
Like
in
roads?
the
Are they
mountains.
roads or are
They're
they
not
walking
roads,
trails?
but they're just walking trails, and you can
Oh,
go
because
there.
I was wondering, because there's a place called is it Pankisi
Pankisi
Valley
Gorge. Yep.
Gorge, right, in northern Georgia, all right, on the Caucasus border
Yeah.
with
That's our
Chechnya.
yeah.
And supposedly some Chechen rebels, as they call them in this country, are hanging out there.
Yes, we had them for more than a year before the revolution. Actually, 2 years
Before
ago.
your Georgian Revolution.
Before our Georgian Revolution, yes.
Yeah.
2 years ago, we had actually, 3 years ago, actually, we had all main Chechen leaders, whatever you call them, terrorists, I don't know,
Freedom
Boyeviks,
fighters,
as they
yeah,
call them,
right.
freedom fighters.
What do they call them?
Boyeviks, Russian word for that is
Povik?
Boyevik,
Boyevik, which means...
which means gunmen, basically. If you
Conmen.
translate
Criminal, like a
it,
criminal?
but yeah, it amounts to criminal,
Gangster.
obviously, gangster.
Gangster, yeah.
Yes. They've spent all winter in Georgia.
Now,
and
were
they
did
went
they
back
have
to
any
Chechnya
official
for-
protection from Georgia?
No,
at that
they
time?
never had official protection, and Georgian government was always denying that they were in Georgia.
But did the government know?
Government knew, and government benefited a lot because all the
Oh.
there is a belief, and I also believe in that, and there are some facts that prove it, that there was most of the guns that these people had actually were going through Georgia. And Georgian authorities were very much benefiting from that illegal not only guns but also drug.
The money, you mean?
Dealing
Benefiting the money?
Absolutely. We
So
had
So
a
it wasn't
minister.
a philosophical thing, it was more of an economic...
It was a very much economical corruption.
Yeah, they
We had
didn't care whether they were A or B, they were
Right.
just making the money.
Right, and then also they were always saying that, well, in heart, Georgians, most of the Georgians will tell you, if they will be sincere, that they're for independence of Chechnya.
Yeah, right.
While politically, they won't say it.
Yeah, right.
Because we
It's
are not
dangerous,
benefiting from that ourselves, because we have our own rebellious parts in Georgia. Then,
Right. Yeah.
then next question will be, okay, what about your own part?
Right.
So that was sort of philosophical justification for them.
Yeah.
While they were benefiting a lot from that, they were still
see.
saying that we are supporting freedom fighters.
But
Yeah.
but you just characterized it as an aspect of the corruption of
Absolutely.
the previous government under
Wealth
Shevardnadze.
creation.
Absolutely.
Do you think
And,
Shevardnadze himself was aware of what was going on? And
well, first of all, I believe that he was aware. And if he was not aware, then it's even bigger problem.
I suppose, right.
Because you have a
Right.
president who has no idea what's going on in your own country.
Right. Now, Shevardnadze, who was the president of Georgia, who was deposed during this revolution almost a year ago, was kind of a hero to Americans at the end of the Cold War, because he was the foreign minister under Gorbachev.
Right.
And, we kind of liked
He
this
was
guy.
Gorbachev?
Yeah, don't you remember Shevardnadze?
I
He
know the
was-
name, but I couldn't put a face to
He
it.
was Minister of Foreign Affairs when the Soviet Union collapsed. Actually.
Right, and that was like
job.
friendly
Yes.
between
Darling
U.S. and
of the West.
USSR.
Yeah.
But then he went back to his native land, I guess.
Yes, he
Georgia?
was first secretary of the Communist Party for 20 or more years in Georgia before he went to Russia. And then you don't become Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Soviet Union just by accident.
No.
So it definitely meant that he behaved well when he was
Yes,
first
of
secretary
course,
of the
yes.
Communist Party. That's
Yes.
why he was promoted and appointed there.
Yes.
Which already speaks for him. Then he was for those years the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and then when there was an attempt of military coup in Soviet Union, he resigned, and he had
Oh,
this
at that
famous
point.
speech in the parliament. You can call it parliament.
Which
Duma.
parliament?
Duma.
Soviet Union.
Duma.
No, it was not Duma. At
Oh,
that
no.
time, it was Soviet Supreme Council of the
Okay,
Soviet
yeah.
Union, which amounted to the parliament, where he spoke about the dictatorship. And his famous words, everybody remembers there, was that Mr. Mikhail Sergeyevich, which was Gorbachev, dictatorship is coming. And if you don't do anything about it, I'm off. And he resigned.
Dictatorship in
Now-
Russia was
In
coming because
Soviet
they wanted to
Union.
throw out...
Right, military
I keep
is...
saying Russia, I apologize.
Yeah, well,
No,
at that
I'll
time
get
it
it
was
straight.
still
I
Soviet
understand now,
Union,
yeah.
yeah.
No, wait,
I understand.
I'm really not clear on the precise sequence of
Okay,
events here.
there was in
The attempted coup.
in 90,
Of Gorbachev.
beginning of 90 of Gorbachev, and this is when Shevardnadze stepped down
Yes.
because he spoke at this Supreme Council about this coming military dictatorship, and nobody supported him, and then he said, then I have no place in this government, and he left.
No, but I mean, at this point, when you have that group of people who had done the coup, are
No, this is
now in
No,
Russia.
coup
charge?
did not happen.
This is Russia.
Oh, this is just before.
This is Mikhail Gorbachev in Russia.
Yes, I know,
Right.
I
Okay.
know.
All right, okay.
He made this speech just before the coup.
Just before the coup.
Oh, so he was anticipating what
He was
in fact
anticipating
was
Oh, he knew the
happening.
coup was coming?
I
what
see.
actually happened in a small scale in summer. I mean, they did not manage to finish the coup, but coup was there.
Oh, I
When
see.
Gorbachev was gone for summer holidays, the militaries took over.
So,
but then
so
it was
Shevardnadze had resigned before the actual coup.
Absolutely, he
Okay.
resigned before the actual coup,
I
and
see.
he stayed in Moscow for a year.
Interesting.
And then in February, in March, sorry,
So he must have known it
92,
was coming?
he come back to
Well, that's
Georgia.
the point. He
Did
had
everybody
a-
know it was coming? I mean, the top people?
What happened before his coming to Georgia was that in 1919 we had first democratic elections, and we had opposition winning those elections, and we had leader of the national movement elected as a president of Georgia in summer 91 after the parliamentary elections in 1990. And then we had a military coup at the end of 91. In December 91, which started its very, I don't know, it was maybe an accident, but on the birthday of Stalin. And
we're talking about Georgia now.
we're talking
Yes.
about Georgia.
Yes.
And Stalin was a Georgian.
Yes. Another famous
Wow,
Georgian.
I didn't even
Yeah, I
know
knew
about
that.
this military coup in
Neither did
Georgia.
I.
I knew you had a civil war.
Which was the civil war later on.
So the military coup
military coup
happened when
happened-
Gorbachev, when it happened in Russia the same time?
No,
or
it was a
No,
year
no,
after.
no, no.
a year after.
Year after.
Okay.
It was when Soviet Union was not there anymore.
Okay.
It was already an independent Georgia.
All right.
Okay, so you say you
So
had
we
the
had-
president was whom?
The president was Zviad Gamsakhourdia, who was head of the national movement before, when he was in opposition. He was biggest dissident during
Aha.
the Soviet time, spent lots of time in jails in Siberia and all these things.
And he was deposed
he
in
was
a military coup.
elected in
No, he was
91
elected.
May,
Yeah.
and then in December 91 we had a military coup,
Yeah.
and he was ousted from the office. On 6th of January he left Georgia with a small group of his supporters. He
Was this a
fled.
bloodless coup?
Absolutely,
Right.
because we had the civil war. There were 2,000 people killed on the streets of
No, I said a
Tbilisi.
bloodless.
Bloodless.
Oh, bloodless! No, it was
No.
bloody. It was very bloody coup.
And this was mainly happening in Tbilisi?
It
or
was
the
happening
countries?
only in Tbilisi. Only.
That's the capital.
So
not,
2,000
not even
people
in
were-
Tbilisi, on the one street of Tbilisi, we are
Are
on
you
the
saying
governmental
2,000
office.
people were
2,000
killed
people.
in Tbilisi?
Yes, that's the record. Which.
And you were there at this time?
Yeah. we were
So it's
there.
probably more if that's the record.
So what
Because
is
it
it?
is- usually
No,
it's
I
not.
think it's a little bit
Exaggerated.
exaggerated.
Yeah.
Oh, it is.
So you,
Yeah.
but so what was it like for you to be there during that military coup over a
Well, yeah,
decade
that
ago?
was the most difficult time for all of us. I was 19 years old at that time, and we really felt that. And I was 20 years old actually, and I was at a university student. And actually, all the demonstrations against that government started at the university, but we were demonstrating
Against the which government? The
against
military?
against the national government which we had.
Oh, why was
But
that?
because the guys were from the opposition, and once they got to power, they never really understood what it meant, and they were still behaving the way they behaved before. They were actually fighting against something which was not there anymore. They were still fighting against the
Yeah, they don't
Soviet Union,
understand, yeah.
Soviet
So
occupation.
Yeah,
give me
which was gone.
a concrete example of how that would manifest itself.
Oh yeah, there is
in
a
their
very
policies
there is
or
a
whatever.
great example in the I don't remember which month it was, but after the national government was there, and after the Soviet Union was dissolved officially,
Yeah,
like in
right.
Moscow, they said that it's not there anymore. Bye.
Right.
2 months after that, what they did was that they blocked one of the main railroad ways in Georgia.
Who?
I mean, the
The
national
government.
government, Georgian
Government.
government, and they said they're boycotting to Russia by that. But what actually happened was that they blocked the railroad in Georgia, and Russians did not care about
This
it.
is like
obviously.
bananas. You know, Woody Allen could make a movie out of
Absolutely,
this, it sounds
absolutely.
like.
Well, let me just ask this
Right.
friendly in a way. From their point of view, what was the logic of this?
From their point of view, the
the
logic was that this is the railroad which is crossing, which was crossing all the Caucasus. Like it comes from Armenia and goes all the way to Russia. So they blocked it. They actually blocked some goods going from Armenia or from rest of Georgia to Russia. Yes, but at the end. We suffered from that. Our economy
Yeah, yeah,
suffered
yeah.
from that, and not
Yeah.
Russian economy. Yes, something in Armenia as well, but that was not a protest against Armenia. They meant to protest against Russia, and there was no consequence from that.
So everybody
So
just
then
said,
the
what are they doing?
military intervenes.
So that was a little bit. That was very naive and a little bit
Yeah, I see.
very patriotic, almost chauvinist government. They never actually managed to become chauvinist because they did not have time for that. But if it lasted long, we could have get.
Did they do things like say you couldn't speak Russian anymore or
Well,
something like
even
that?
more,
and-
even more. The president, when he was already a president, the guy, the leader of this national movement, he was already a president, and he was still going on demonstrations, asking people to come on the streets, and his main slogan was "Georgia for Georgians."
Uh-oh. Ethnic cleansing.
Well, we did not get to that,
But that was the idea.
because
That
he
was
was
the-
there
the
just for
trend.
Would've
6
been
months.
So the military was actually a savior, would you say, at this point?
Military
or-
was no, because the military
Yeah.
was a very strange military.
like everything.
They were run by the
We
Russian
had,
army? Were they trained and run by the Russian
No.
army? No.
This was paramilitary force,
Oh,
which
okay.
was composed of the people who were in jails for many years for very serious crimes like murder, rape,
Yeah, right,
you name it.
Wow.
And they went out from the prisons exactly at that time because that's when their
Oh, the
terms.
prison doors were opened,
yeah.
maybe also.
And they just did it. They could do everything. I mean,
They were
because
So
they
these
were
were
ruthless.
gangsters.
these
or-
were gangsters,
These
and
were real
there's
gangsters.
there's a they actually proved that they were real gangsters after that. For 5 years after that military coup, when Shevardnadze was back, we had probably the most horrible times in the history of Georgia.
Okay, now was
Yes.
Shevardnadze,
yeah.
he was the
After
president
military coup.
when the military gangsters took over, they put him in his...
No. After military coup, they formed a military government, which was two leaders of those paramilitary forces, one civilian. But they felt that people would not tolerate with that. And they needed something. And this something, the best
Legitimacy.
something was Shevardnadze, obviously.
Ah.
And everybody believes in Georgia that all the coup and everything was made up at the end of the day. My personal evaluation to everything what happened in Georgia at the end of '91 is that it was a communist revenge.
Okay. To take back
Which-
Georgia for the Russians.
Right.
But Shevardnadze,
Shevardnadze
that's what I was
was
going to
a
say
master
earlier. He would
of-
be seen as the Russians' man.
Absolutely. He was master behind
Yeah.
all of that.
All right, so he would be seen as the Russian man, though, by the Georgians, right?
Absolutely. While
Yeah.
Russians actually hated him.
Yeah, right. That's what I was going to say earlier.
Yeah.
The
And
Russians hated him.
No,
The Russians hated him for everything.
The
Because
Russians are
because
the-
he was Georgian
Oh.
from
Yeah,
the
sure.
beginning. And after
And
that,
they blamed him for the dissolution of
after
the Soviet
that,
Union.
because of the
and-
dissolution of the Soviet Union, because
Yeah.
of all the stupid policies he had towards Russians at the end of after he became the president of Georgia, he was always trying. You know this expression that don't be a Catholic more than a pope. That was exactly.
No,
he
yeah,
was
he wanted to be more,
Right.
more
Right.
Russian
He was
than the
always
Russians.
trying to prove that he was not pro-Russian,
That he was not
while
pro-Russian.
he was pro-Russian.
Yeah, okay, I see.
But he was trying to prove he was not because of that.
So he
we've got
alienated
this
the Russians also.
whole complexity
Right,
of problems that our
right.
country had with Russia for those years.
Oh my
Anyway,
God.
he was back in March. And he was followed by Mr. James Baker, who will be more famous for this audience here, because they were like the best friends. And Mr. Genscher, who was German Chancellor at that time. And we were told by those two leaders of the world at that time that that was the best option for Georgia.
Well, wouldn't Shevardnadze have appeared to us to be a pro-Western person for real?
Yeah.
You know, having.
Well, we
Yeah.
would have probably wanted him in there, right?
Right.
But I mean, do you think our policymakers must have known what was really
know,
going on with
Possible.
him?
There was a very interesting statement made by Mr. Genscher when he was in Georgia, and probably it answers your question. He said, that speaks for the perception of Shevardnadze by West, probably. He said that one Georgian made an iron curtain, meaning Stalin,
Stalin.
and another Georgian destroyed it, meaning Shevardnadze.
Yeah.
That
That's
was
interesting.
something
Yeah, yeah.
why the West was grateful to Shevardnadze.
Right, sure.
And he has a very interesting nickname during the Soviet times. He was called by Margaret Thatcher as a Mr. Smile man,
Ah,
Mr. Smile,
Mr.
which
Smile.
meant that among all those, which is true,
Grey eminences.
grey
we call them great
generals,
eminences.
communists,
Yeah.
KGB guys. There
Right.
was this Georgian always making jokes, always smiling. He has great sense of humor. I mean,
wonderful.
great, the best I've ever seen. Even in the most critical times, he was managing with the situation because of his humor.
Well, how do you like
He would have
that?
come up with something that,
Everybody
wow,
laughed.
everybody would just sit and smile and forgot what the debate was about before that.
We have a very personable president ourselves right now,
Yes.
I'm told, right? And
That's
that
right.
counts for a lot with some people, you know?
But I would doubt his sense of humor.
Yeah. No, right. Not much of a sense of humor, though,
Right.
but personable.
Yeah.
All right, so
so-
where is Shevardnadze now? Is he still alive?
He's sitting in his home writing memoirs.
In
Under house
Georgia.
arrest?
Georgia.
Is he,
No,
or
no, no,
just-
no.
He's
He's a
fine.
free man.
Well, let's continue with the
All right,
story
okay.
then, because
Yeah,
I
go
don't
ahead.
really
Yeah,
know
go
the
through the story,
details
right.
of this
Okay.
civil war. What was that?
So
about?
civil war, we had a chain of civil wars. We had it started in Tbilisi, as I said, during this coup.
But why do you call that a civil war?
internal.
We call
Civil
it
is
civil
internal.
war because it happened inside. I mean, there was no enemy we were fighting against, right?
Georgian
Well, who-
against Georgian?
Georgians against Georgians.
I mean, who were these thousands or maybe hundreds of people
These were
killed? Who,
supporters on two sides. These were supporters of the former president and supporters of those paramilitary, or members of the paramilitary mainly. Because you did not have people on the streets, you did not have like popular revolution or like we had last year, for example.
Well, were
It
these
was just a group of.
assassinations, or I mean, how?
No, it was not assassination. There was an open shooting on the main street of the city Tbilisi
Was this one day?
It was.
or
It lasted for 16 days,
16 days.
and it was 16 days non-stop shooting, and obviously people died.
Wow.
And it
you
was
were,
shooting
you
not
were
just
huddled
by
in your
machine
homes.
guns, but
People were huddled in their homes.
yeah,
and-
most of the people. We because it was so much isolated in one part of the city, you could not even feel it in the rest of the country,
Okay.
or even in the rest of the city, because it was like somewhere there. But then then we had a real civil war, which was like already very
Can you tell us
horrifying.
the year approximately on that?
Yeah, it was right after Shevardnadze arrived in '92. They've started. Our former president was from Western Georgia, from Samegrelo, which is a part there,
Oh.
and all Samegrelo was obviously supporting.
Can you
former
say the name
president.
again?
Samegrelo.
That's a person?
That's the part of Georgia.
Oh, that's
from
a
where,
section?
That's from
Oh, wait,
where
that's
the
not
president
Abkhazia?
was. No,
That's-
it's not Abkhazia.
This is that's not South Ossetia?
No.
This is a
it's-
difference.
It's Georgia.
Okay.
It's Georgians,
Yeah.
populated by Georgians. I mean, but we have this, like you have here, the states, right?
Yeah.
Maryland
I
and
thought
Virginia,
these were
both
states
are
too.
United
I thought
States.
these were states too that I just mentioned, South Ossetia and Abkhazia.
No, they're not states. They're parts of Georgia.
Yeah.
We don't call them states. We call them regions.
Well, whatever you call them,
Right.
but I.
yeah, but they are populated by national minorities. They're not populated. Well,
the
they're Georgians
minorities
live
are
there.
majorities in those areas.
No.
Say it
Oh.
again.
No.
So in there's areas of Georgia, regions of Georgia,
Regions of
that
Georgia.
are not populated by people that consider themselves to be Georgian first. Is this what you're saying? Or
Yes,
that-
but not by majority. But I mean, majority of the population in any part of Georgia is Georgian.
Okay.
Big majority.
Oh,
But you have regions where some minority groups live together. So you get, for example, in Abkhazia, before the war, we had 17% Abkhaz living in Abkhazia.
Abkhazia? Abkhaz? Is that the
Abkhaz,
name
which
of
is
it?
another nation. This is a nation. It's not. They are not Georgians.
Alright.
They speak different language. They are predominantly Muslim.
Well, by another nation, you mean another culture. For us,
Well,
a
they
nation
see
is like a
themselves as
country.
a nation.
Right, okay, another ethnicity.
Okay,
That's
right,
it,
right.
Another ethnicity. So that was just 17% of the population there. Rest were Georgians. But
This is the extreme northwest corner of the country on the
Right,
Black Sea
on the Black
borders,
Sea.
and the
Borders
Russians use
Russian.
this as a resort.
absolutely.
Yeah.
What's the
as
name of
well
this
as we did.
town?
Abkhazia.
Abkhazia, okay.
Yeah.
Because I know the Russians go to the Black Sea for vacation.
Well, this is one
Right,
of the
that
places
was the
they
most
go.
favorite.
This is one of the...
In Abkhazia, we had most important party leaders' villas. All
Okay.
their villas were there.
All right.
Gorbachev's
You mean from
villa
Oh,
was
I know.
there.
Oh,
Okay,
really?
I understand.
Oh, really? And was that where they had? Did they have dachas
Gorbachev
there, or-
actually never finished it.
Is that where his mother was?
He started.
Something? No? No.
He started building it, but he
Is
never
the villa
finished
the same
it.
as a dacha or completely
It's dacha,
different?
yeah.
Okay. Let me just say that you are listening to The Professors on WNHU West Haven 88.7 FM, broadcasting from the campus of the University of New Haven. And the professors are David Morris and Joel Marks, yours truly. And our guest today is Tinatin Khidasheli from the country of Georgia, who is telling us about the recent history of Georgia coming into its own as a country, having been liberated, should I say,
Right,
from the former Soviet Union. And please continue with this fascinating story, Tina.
Well, could I say something?
Yeah.
One of the problems I have is, one of the joys of my radio show is I can sit with someone that will give me a chronology of what happened in a place, but as an American, I have almost no knowledge of this.
That's right. It's
It's just invisible to me.
Yeah.
And it's invisible to my students, it's invisible to my everyone.
to our listeners,
To our
mostly,
listeners.
probably, yeah.
And I wonder why we don't have some mechanism, even through the educational systems, to actually have these kind of chronologies on, say, Georgia. And many countries
Yeah.
have done this, people from other countries. And then these would just be available on the internet to people that want to learn about that.
Well, everything is available
It is
on the
on the
It
internet.
is available, yeah.
I
yeah.
learn about what's going on in Georgia by going to BBC.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
that's
they're
a
more
pretty good
informed.
source.
They're much
Well,
more informing.
CNN, forget it. But
Well, they
you
say
know,
CNN is an arm of the government in the United States, supposedly. I don't know if that's
Yeah,
true.
but BBC is wonderful. Just BBC.com or something
Right.
like
So
that.
you get a
know.
better
You can get
view of...
all kinds of stories.
Just
from
type in
Because
the
they're
word
more
Georgia
interested
for
in world.
search, and
They're not so internalist or whatever, jingoist or whatever.
It's a very interesting point what you've just said. And yesterday we had lecture series in my program, what I'm attending now, and that's exactly what I was saying there, that why a country like Georgia, which is so small, which is so unimportant, which is like somewhere nobody knows, like in the mountains, who cares, was the, and that might be a surprise for you what I say now, but was the second most aided country from the United States government after Israel.
Was or is?
Second. I don't know
Since
today.
when? Since when?
Since independence. Since Shevardnadze came there.
Answer?
Since 92.
Answer has three letters,
Answer.
right? Oil.
Right, and we don't have oil.
Well, you have
No,
a
but you
pipeline.
got a pipeline.
Pipeline, yes.
There you go. There's
Answer
your
is a
Pipeline.
strategic location, whatever it
Yeah,
is.
it
Oh
is.
yeah,
And it's not
location,
just-
location, as our realtors
And it's not
say.
just the pipeline, it's also that because
It's a-
of Russia,
It's an entry into Russia and Azerbaijan. All that.
and it's
an entry point.
it's a very reliable country if it is friendly to you against Iran.
Well, you know what?
Oh, that's right. All right. So it's a strategic location.
So it has a very strategic
You know what?
location.
An analogy, it seems to me, is a tiny little country, Cuba,
Right.
which for America politically was always a thorn in our side because the Soviets had.
and they were willing
had-
to pay a lot of money to Cuba to
That's
keep it
right,
stable.
and
keep it
yet we, the U.S. has no qualms whatsoever about doing the same sort of thing or attempting the same
Well,
sort of
that's
thing
true.
with
But
little old
we
Georgia.
might be
right?
blinded, though. We don't see ourselves as doing these things, probably, or at least the.
All right.
The
Well, when we
masses
do it,
don't.
it's
The
okay. It's for
masses
the
don't,
forces
yeah.
of good and right.
Sure,
and-
right. Truth, justice, and. the
But
American way.
meanwhile, now your new leader, President Saakashvili, he is supposedly quotes pro-Western, which is antagonizing President Putin of Russia a great deal.
He is absolutely pro-Western, different from Shevardnadze, who was pretending to be pro-Western all the
Okay.
time.
And he was pro-Russian.
He was very much pro-Russian,
Okay.
obviously. He was actually pro himself, to put it
All
in
right,
the
well,
most
that's-
correct
that's
way.
probably true,
I mean,
yes.
he was the
Yes.
guy who was always surrounded by those,
Sycophants. People would tell him how great
by
he
his
is.
family,
Yeah.
which was complete nonsense. I mean, all his family was involved in every important
Right.
business in a
Right.
country.
That happens.
And
That
we-
happens
They were
everywhere.
heading every important
That
business
happens.
entity in a country, and
That
then he had
happens.
all these allies.
That happens all
Read
the
the
time.
former communist people who were also trying to get all the benefits from the country, whatever.
So you mean he would
The
accept
current-
money from Russians, from Americans,
Put his
whoever,
family in power.
right?
From
Friends.
anybody. He was a puppet. At the end of the day, for the last 4 years, I would say he was just a puppet.
Of
He
Russia.
was a nice puppet.
Russia?
Of who?
No, of his own surrounding.
Okay.
A nice puppet they could use to please the West by having this darling guy there sitting and
And the West would be happy
Could
giving
I-
and
money.
West
Could I-
being happy,
yeah.
giving unconditional money, unconditional aid for 12 years to a guy who was basically stealing it.
Right.
And you were paying taxes which my government
Yeah.
was stealing.
Yeah, right.
And this is the obviously most problematic part
there's
of
so much for us to discuss here. Could we just complete the chronology?
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Thumbnail.
Okay,
so
let-
I really need to understand this major civil
so
war.
in 92 we've got Shevardnadze back in March.
Yeah.
And then the civil war started in Western Georgia, in Samegrelo, as I said, because we had a majority of the population there supporting the former president. So they were going in the streets massively in tens of thousands and protesting against this coup and protesting against
And
the
again,
military
this
government.
is
and
like
against-
as an extension of their seeking independence from the former Soviet
No, no,
Union.
no,
as
it's
it
a-
were.
no.
I
The
thought these were
Soviet
the
Union was
forces.
gone.
No, but I'm saying those forces, the Russian control, are these the same forces that had been the opposition that had first taken power in Georgia? Now they've been deposed by the military coup. So in effect, they're still fighting the same battle.
Yeah,
for-
because for most of the Georgians, for the majority, as I said already, this coup was understood as a revenge. As
Right,
communist, not Soviet that much anymore because there was no Soviet Union
Yeah.
anymore, but communist revenge, definitely.
Oh, not even necessarily Russian, but communist.
Communist.
Ah.
Communist
okay,
revenge.
Okay.
A Georgian communist, whatever communist, doesn't matter. Communist revenge, meaning obviously KGB revenge, and meaning obviously at the end of the day ties with the Russia. But for us, Shevardnadze was already an evil by itself, without any affiliations
Uh-huh.
to whatever. I will tell you one story, a very short one, why he is such an evil
Okay,
for us.
yeah.
In 78, Georgia was the only republic out of 15, only, in the Soviet Union, which had 2 official languages.
Oh.
Russian and Georgian. All the other republics had only one official language, only Russian. So that was a privilege for us. But there was a reason for this privilege, because this was the most disobedient republic. And the language would have cost them a lot. So that was okay. In 78, when Shevardnadze was the first secretary of the Communist Party, he initiated another new plan of Russification. And he initiated amendments to our constitution, which would have said that the only official language is Russian.
Oh. With Russians.
78.
Wow.
This is in Georgia.
This is in Georgia.
Yes,
He's
that's
first secretary of the Communist Party of Georgia.
Wow.
And himself a
And-
Georgian.
And himself Georgian. And he got, in 78, tens of thousands of students on the streets. Everybody was on the streets for days and nights.
Now, we didn't know such a thing could be
Right.
possible
know
in the
anything.
There was
Soviet
no
Union,
way
right?
you could know it, obviously.
Right.
Everybody was out. I was, 5 years old? I still have pictures. Because there was nobody to leave me with.
Wow.
And all my family was out, so they took me as I was taking my son last year on those demonstrations. He was
Georgia
of the
is
same
special.
age as I
Georgia
was.
has always been
And
special.
somebody was smart enough in Moscow and got the point that they cannot do it because it will get big trouble to this country.
Yeah, right.
And they've just stopped it. And they've called Shevardnadze in Moscow. I don't know what they talked about, but Shevardnadze was back and he said, okay. And then, with his humor and all this nice wording and speeches he was always making, he convinced Georgians that it was not him. Actually, it was Moscow who wanted to change the constitution, and he went to Moscow
And
to
straighten it
convince
out.
them
Right.
that it was impossible.
We know all about
And
that
we-
sort of thing. We have it in this country.
Right. We
Sure.
all believed in that.
Yeah.
Only now, when KGB archives were open,
Oh,
we learned
no
that actually that was his
kidding.
initiative. The first letter that speaks
Isn't
about this
that
was written by
interesting?
him.
Isn't that
The other story
interesting?
was that in 80s, beginning of 80s, there was a airplane hijack in Georgia, and there were 3 guys who took this plane, and they were planning to land in Turkey and then to escape from Turkey. Well, obviously they were stopped and they were brought back, and there was a trial, and they were executed. We had death penalty, obviously, at that time, and they were executed. But the fact is that, well, first of all, everybody was against execution of those guys who, for us, were dissidents. They did not do any harm to anybody in the airplane. Nobody. I mean, the only thing they were asking to escape from the Soviet Union. Okay, it's a crime, obviously. You're hijacking the airplane. It's not the biggest and best thing you do. But that was their form of protest. Whatever. They deserved the jail, obviously, but not the death sentence. Anyway, they were executed. But what happened was that on Shevardnadze's order, there were 5 more people convicted and also executed. One of them was priest, and 4 others were the students, as co-organizers of this hijacking. All files prove that there was no relation with hijacking of those people. But there was something else, another
Just a
story, which was that they were very much anti-communist, and Shevardnadze just used it
Pretext, yeah.
for having for getting rid of those people as well. And this is a memory which is in everybody's mind.
Wow.
And when Shevardnadze was back, people met him in the airport with the pictures of those people, of those 8 guys who were executed. And obviously everybody remembered the language story. So whatever.
Yeah, boy, we had no sense of
Well,
this,
he
of course,
was
when
Russia's
he was
man.
foreign
He was
minister.
just-
he
he's
was
Russia's man.
at that point, unfortunately, he was your man, because he
Oh,
was brought to
American now.
Georgia not by Russians. He was brought to Georgia accompanied by James Baker, not by somebody from the
Oh, at
Communist
this
Party.
time
We thought he was a great guy.
And we remember,
Well,
I will
we
never
don't-
forget it, unfortunately for me. In '92, when Shevardnadze was back in March and Mr. Baker was there was a public meeting in the main square of Tbilisi, where Baker was speaking about the future of Georgia and how with this nice guy we will get democracy and all this stuff. On the other side of the square, exactly at the moment when James Baker was talking about that, there was a demonstration, anti-Shevardnadze demonstration, and people were killed there. And there was a shooting, which Mr. Baker should have heard. There was no way he would not hear it. So we unfortunately faced all those things there. And then
So the Civil War.
and then they went on this crusade fight in Samegrelo in western Georgia.
Who's they now?
On all those paramilitaries who were used
The
by
same-
Shevardnadze
okay.
when he
So they went after
came.
a section of the
They
country?
went after the people after the part of Georgia which was still supporting the former president. And we had months and months and months of arbitrary executions. People, many people raped there, many families destroyed because they were killing everybody who would dare to have a picture of the former president, to pronounce his name in public, whatever. Everything was there. They robbed the whole part, which was the most richest part in Georgia at that time.
Richest in what sense?
Because they were producing citruses.
Oh.
They had
And that
money.
was the most exported
There was
thing
wealth
to
there.
Russia, and it was really the richest and wealthiest part
So
in
they
Georgia.
laid waste to this countryside, essentially?
They basically,
Killed
they
all the
basically
people that-
destroyed
It was
everything
like
there.
10,000, was it, killed or something? Or-
No, 10,000 comes after that.
Oh, after that. Oh my
After
God.
that, in
All this has happened just in the last
in 10
decade.
years. Yeah,
I
in
didn't know any of
24.
that.
We don't get a word about this over
Because
here.
they don't want us. They don't want us to know.
Yeah.
Of course,
So.
because Shevardnadze was such a nice guy. He
But
could
now,
not do all
okay,
those bad
this
things.
so-called
At the
civil
same ti-
war,
this
but
is the
actually
civil
you're
war.
characterizing
That's why I
it
said that we
as
had
the paramilitary
chains of
went
civil wars.
after
Right.
people.
Absolutely, they went after
But,
people.
but was there any, even a pretext of provocation from the people they were
No.
going
the
after?
provocation was the demonstration.
Well,
Peaceful
it's just that they
demonstrations
were
in the
there.
streets. That
Okay.
was the provocation.
They were there.
After that, obviously, they've got fighters.
Uh-huh.
They've got people, guerrillas, basically in the forests who were fighting back. Definitely.
Who was
The brothers
arming them?
and,
Where did
Was
they
it
get
the
their
CIA?
support?
CIA?
Russians.
The Russians.
Of course, both sides were run by the Russians. That was the best thing for Russians.
Wait a minute.
I mean,
God, the
all
Ru-
they needed in Georgia was
Yeah.
a destabilization.
Right, then Russia could
all
come
they
in
needed
and
in Georgia
exert influence, huh?
was what our dear president at that time, Shevardnadze, said when he was still first secretary of the, when he was foreign minister of the Soviet Union. When all the national movement started in '89, he said in Moscow in one of the TV interviews, I ensure you that if ever those republics will get independence, these are the words he said on TV or publicly, I will see Georgia on its knees begging to Russia, take me back. And that was the words he was trying to make true for all the years he was in power. He was trying to make Georgians to say one day that,
Yes.
okay, let's go
Take
back to the
us
Soviet
back,
Union.
take us back.
We cannot live with this anymore. But
The Commonwealth
this
of Independent States.
Right, the sentiment
Yeah.
was never there. Never. Never. I mean, Georgians who had no electricity for 12 years, who had no gas supply for 12 years,
Yeah.
who were cut from the rest of the world for 12 years, basically. We had, after 5 o'clock, there was no way you could go outside because there were all these criminals running around
Well,
and shooting around.
my understanding, it's still that way.
No, it's not that.
No?
No.
Since
It's
when
not
has
that
it
way.
gotten
Since
better?
'97, it's getting
Since
better. and better.
97?
Yeah.
Well, the first-hand reports I get are that it's not pleasant.
No,
It's
it's not
dangerous.
pleasant, but I mean, it's not.
You
Not
don't
as
have
bad.
electricity.
You
have
can
electricity
walk there.
4 hours a day. The
Yeah,
phones
of
keep
course.
going off, etc., etc.
Yes, but you can walk at night. I mean, you won't be shot by accident.
You might get mugged.
Not really.
Well, I know
mean, not
somebody who
really.
was, but I mean, of course, that's one incident.
Well, you are the foreigner, which makes it different.
No, this
This is a
local
native person.
Ah, okay, native person.
Who lives
okay.
in fear with locks on the door, had the apartment broken into, etc.,
Yeah,
etc.
of course it
The
happens,
Russians
but
have that
it's
too.
But it
not
happens
happening
everywhere,
like
right?
it's not happening like it was in '93, '94,
All right,
95,
so
96 because
it's all relative.
at that time it was 90% of the people could have suffered from that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, like everywhere, you get
Depends
it here,
on the
you get it in New
neighborhood
York,
and
you
so
get it
forth.
everywhere.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
All right,
now
so
it's
please,
normal. I mean,
so
it's
bring
everywhere.
us again. I'm so sorry to have to
I'm-
rush this
and I'm
thumbnail sketch
finishing
of the
it.
history of
So then,
recent history of
simultaneously
Georgia.
with this Western Georgia pogroms, as they call it in Russian.
Really?
you
Pogroms. My
got-
grandmother fled from a pogrom.
Absolutely, it was a
in
typical
Russia.
pogrom.
Pogrom means criminal, right? You said. Or?
Pogrom
no, no,
means,
no.
I don't know.
What were those- I thought you were
translated
called those
It's
people.
an organized effort to terrorize a certain
Right.
people. Or
Oh, okay.
for certain reasons.
That's a Russian word, you said?
Yeah, it's a Russian war. They went on another crusade war to Abkhazia. This is where we've got 10,000 people killed.
who is they now?
It's again the same,
same
people.
paramilitary?
Because that was the only military force Shevardnadze had at that time.
Okay.
It was police also was there, but I mean police was a very small portion of it. So they went to Abkhazia because some Abkhaz, due to all the circumstances going on in Georgia, decided to proclaim their independence. So we went to return this land back to Georgia, and obviously we lost the war because every single hostage Georgian army was getting was Russian soldier from the other side. So we had a war, real war against Russia. Because
But now you had said originally there were just 17% of the population of that region.
Right. And the 17% of the population
this
in the
minority
region,
ethnicity.
which was 1.4% of the whole country, won the war against us.
They won the war.
I mean, it's impossible.
Well, us,
obviously.
but now you make it as if you're identifying with the paramilitary forces
No,
of
I'm
the
identifying
Shevardnadze.
myself with the rest of Georgia.
Okay, but it's so complicated here because the people they were actually fighting were people you
Absolutely.
yourself helped depose eventually.
Absolutely. But when I say us, because you said the percentages,
Right.
percentages for Abkhaz.
Yeah.
And I'm not Abkhaz, I'm Georgian, so
Right.
that's when I say us. So 17% in that region, 1.4% of the rest of Georgia
Right.
won the war against whatever.
Right. So what happened to
80%
the
of Georgians.
83% of native Georgians
Right.
in that region?
They are out.
They're
are
out.
IDPs, they are displaced, and they are in the rest of Georgia.
Living in
all
hotels
over.
in Tbilisi.
They're out now, out physically out.
Physically out.
And they're also economically out?
Absolutely, by all
So
means.
then who runs it now? Is this
Now there
group
is
of...
now you have 70,000 people living there who are all Russian citizens.
There meaning?
In
Russian-
Abkhazia,
Oh,
Okay.
Russian citizens.
everybody is
in
a Russian
addition
citizen.
to the Abkhazis.
Oh, there is no Abkhaz citizenship like that.
Oh, so by Russian citizen you mean the Abkhazis? Is that who you-
Yes, they
Okay.
are Abkhaz, but
Yeah.
they've got Russian citizenship by simplified procedure.
Ah.
Very interesting.
And you mean these few people are occupying a land that had many, many, many more thousands of people
Of
residing
course.
in it?
We had 500,000 people living there according to the 1989 census.
500,000, and
Half a
now
million,
it's down
and now
to...
it's just 17,000.
Can you believe this?
Which is
Not
exactly-
17,000. You mean 70%?
No, it's
70.
70,000. Yeah.
70,000.
Which is exactly
this is in a
the number
section
of
of Georgia.
Abkhaz. It was just 80,000 Abkhaz living there.
All right.
Not to talk about the percentages, but to talk about the numbers.
And now they've taken
In whole
control
Georgia, we had
of an area.
80,000 Abkhaz.
And so, of course, you're... Well, I don't want to skip ahead. Okay,
And lots of Abkhaz
continue.
are gone themselves. I mean, because of all these troubles, they immigrated to Russia, or you have many of them here in the United States as well. So it's basically now a mixture of different people, Abkhaz majority, plus Russians, plus Chechens.
I hate to draw an
who
analogy. Israel...
escaped.
Yeah, are the Abkhaz Muslim, Catholic?
They're
Russian
predominantly
Orthodox, Jewish?
Muslim.
They're Muslim.
Predominantly Muslim, yeah.
So where is
They
this
were
located in Georgia?
Christianized,
Like where is the
by Georgians.
location? Is it near Chechnya? Where is the location of this place in
Abkhazia?
Georgia?
Abkhazia is
Northwest
northwest of Georgia, right on the Black Sea.
North, west, towards England?
Yes. Right. It's
Yeah.
the northwest corner of Georgia,
Yeah, yeah.
right on
It's
the
right,
Black Sea.
yeah. It's
All right.
it borders.
So why would that? Why would the Muslim?
Yeah. How do
Why
they-
would the? I don't know how to.
Why would
ask
there
this.
be a Muslim enclave
No, but
there?
why would they want that? Why would the Russians want that? Just because they saw that the Muslim people were a way to gain back control over that area?
Of Georgia, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well.
So they were just used by the Russians.
Just one thing to
to
remember as
regain
a
power.
pretext to all we speak here. All these things, Muslim, Christian, Orthodox, whatever, except for Chechnya, obviously, is very symbolic.
All right.
I mean, there was no Muslim Christian in the Soviet Union.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So
right.
all these people are predominantly atheist. There is no
Atheist.
Muslim atheist, right? There is no Muslim ideology behind all of that. We don't have suicide bombers and we don't have stuff like that. I mean, they are civilized fighters, you know, who just use machine guns when the enemy is there. So that's just, and they are very different from Chechens. I mean, they have nothing to do with Chechnya in terms of how they act in war and how they look at this war.
So then what you're saying is the Russian government created Muslims.
No, they did not create Muslims. They are
But I
there
mean,
for
they-
centuries.
They're
No, but the
exploiting
people
this.
exploit-
They're
well, they-
exploiting a difference.
Soviet
But you said they
Union.
really didn't see themselves as separate from the other groups. The Russians went in and created this ethnicity and linked it to Islam, and then that helped them to take control of that region.
Yeah, the biggest difference we had ideologically was not the religion. We fight it mainly about the cultural issues, language.
Right.
Georgians claim that there is no language like Abkhaz language.
Oh.
Every Georgian will tell you that it was created by Russians in 60s. The language
In the
itself,
1960s?
yeah, was just created.
Is that...
A lot of
Alphabet was
languages have
written
been
by
created
Russians.
Yeah, the
Which is
Korean
not
was
true.
created.
This is completely stupid.
Yeah.
I mean, they are nation, separate nation. They have nothing to do with the as an ethnicity with the Georgian ethnicity.
Yeah,
But it
okay.
is also true that these two nations lived in that land for whatever thousands of years this land exists. I don't know. Doesn't matter. 2,000, 3,000, 10,000. doesn't matter. I mean, they live there always, as well as Georgians live there always. What is true is that Soviet Union had this small nationalities policy, which you might know, which was one of the ideological parts of the Soviet doctrine. And the small nationality policies meant self-determination. And every single small nation in all those 15 republics had a small autonomous republic, which was like small state inside the state, and then the state was inside a bigger state. So you had Soviet Union, you had Republic Georgia, for example, and you had Abkhazia as a smaller state. And that was always used as a destabilization. All those small things in Ukraine, in Moldova, in Georgia, you had them everywhere. They were created artificially for having some borders inside those countries. So if something happens, we will have our fifth column, as they call them, inside. So there will be somebody who will fight, and we will fight together with them, which worked. I mean, it worked in Moldova. You have Prednistria.
The Russians were not stupid strategically.
Absolutely not.
I always heard from my Western point of view that the British were the masters at this game, and that they were the ones who were best at creating situations where one group would be at another and the British would gain power. But from what you're saying, the Russians were good at that.
I mean, they were learning all those things from all previous empires.
They were an empire too, though.
Yeah, of course. And they knew how to rule the empire, and Soviet
So my perception as American was Russians were stupid at that stuff.
No.
You know what I mean? But they weren't.
They were not stupid. They never were stupid. The only problem was that the main stupidity they did, probably Soviet Union would never collapse if they were not pushing that much this Homo Sovieticus idea.
What was that?
Which was the creation of one ethnicity.
Called Soviet?
Called Soviets.
I didn't even know that.
Which is like a rationalist Enlightenment ideal, in a way, right?
The Americans. Is this what
like
you're
the
saying,
American ideal, in a way,
Yeah, but you cannot be Soviet by nationality, Soviet. That was the problem.
Well, but America, what about America? We are American by nationality.
Yeah, but you at least have affiliation with the name of the continent, It's America. The continent is called North America, whatever, and you have some kind of affiliation. What Russians could have done successfully was Russification.
Oh, Russification. Okay.
And if they would have pushed
America attempted to be a Protestantization of all the ethnicities that came here.
That's what happened there with the atheists. So they basically managed to eliminate all the religious
And when was this? When was that philosophy, the Russian?
From the beginning.
It comes from Lenin.
Oh, all the way back. I didn't know.
Of course. Homo Sovieticus was the concept which was created by Lenin.
Can you just say
Homo Sovieticus.
Sovieticus, I
Homo,
like that.
men, or people of
Soviet men.
The Soviet man.
And it never worked. And that was the main, I think, like if you speak about these ideological mistakes, that was the main ideological mistake, because when you had nations who claim, like we do, that we live as Georgians for 3,000 years, and we are always there, and we've got Christianity in 4th century, much earlier than Russians did, and then you say that, actually, Georgian Orthodox Church is part of the Russian Orthodox Church. We say, come on, wait a minute. You got your Christianity in 11th century, we've got in 4th. How can we be part of your church? You just come and we can teach you something. So they mixed up the stories, and it was artificial, obviously. You read Georgian history books from the Soviet times, I mean, it has nothing to do with the reality.
So how do you feel about Abkhazia then yourself? I mean,
I'm a very...
if we could start all over again.
Right, I'm a very non-Georgian in that sense, because I go all over the places, including my country. I go to Sukhumi lots of time, which is capital of Abkhazia. I speak everywhere the same. I am for their independence. I mean, if this is what they want,
but again, you said 17%, they.
Whatever, it's their land. I mean, it is our land also.
No, but I mean, if you had 83% of Georgians with 17%...
Well, that's the condition. What I'm saying is that, do you want your independence? Have it. But the people who live there have the right to go back to their homes and live the same way.
Oh, I see.
And this
but
is
then
exactly
the
problem.
Majority.
Of course, and any elections,
it
means that next day they will have referendum.
So that's not a solution, is it?
Well, they're not going to let that happen.
But I mean, it cannot be one-sided solution. You cannot say that, I don't care about the 300,000 Georgians. They can suffer, starve, live in the hotels, in communal places, sharing bathroom, 12 families. I don't care. I just want these 70,000 people to be free and independent. But the problem is that they don't really want to be independent. They just want to go with Russia. And this is what I will
Well, do they
never
want to
agree.
become part
Same
of
with
Russia?
South
Of course,
Ossetia.
Because they know perfectly that they cannot survive as a state.
Yeah.
I mean, there's
Right.
no way they can survive as a state.
Okay.
So,
All right, so
Well,
please
Joel,
bring
wait
us
a
up to
second.
the
No, Joel,
present
let me
with
do
the
something for a
revolution.
second,
We've
all
got
right?
7 minutes left.
I know,
to
I
do the
know,
whole
I know, but
revolution, and
I know, but I wanted to ask a question. You know, this is the David Morris system, and we
Yes.
don't have a photographer today, so I'm
Right.
doing the photography,
Right.
and
a man of many
I
talents.
no, but I'm
He's our
and-
UNH Michael Moore, I call him.
please. Thank you though, but
Quick, Dave.
do,
We got
what do you see this as almost universal, or do you see it as more individualized to your situation? Can you universalize all these things?
Absolutely.
To the idea that it's not Georgia. It's almost the universal game that people play for power.
Absolutely. There
Yeah.
is a big universal thing about which makes all the countries same, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And this is that there is this fundamental question. When you go in a way of democratization, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what happened actually. After the Soviet Union, we all said, okay, now we are democratic states and we are to start. We are to start. It's a transition. Okay, what to do? What's the first? And that's the question. This fundamental question, when it is too much democracy, is it ever too much? What's enough? Who decides? And that's the problem. Who decides? Is it Washington who decides what is good democratic choice for my country, or for
Yeah.
countries like
Iraq.
or for country like Palestine, or country like whatever?
Sure.
Or this is the people themselves
Yeah.
who decide, okay, now I don't want to deal with this, for example, freedom of religion, because I'm 99% Orthodox Christian nation. Everybody in this country is Orthodox Christian. I just don't need these evangelist churches.
Yeah.
What happens next? If you go after them, obviously you need to give protection to those people. But do we need to advocate for freedom of religion when you have so many problems? I don't know. Again, this is, well, I know for myself, but
These are all smoke
I don't-
screens, don't you think, just to mess it up?
absolutely.
I mean, they don't really care what they say.
Absolutely.
The Americans, the Russians,
Every state.
nobody cares what they
I
say.
mean,
All they want to do is gain power.
Yeah, nations are very smart. I
Yeah,
mean,
they are.
What happened in my country, and this is how I get to your point also about the last events, was that, as I've listed, with all those social problems, economic problems, militaries, criminality, everything, Georgians never went on massive demonstrations. Never. For 7 years. They suffered, but they never went.
Why not?
Why? Because they were afraid that social claims, which were obviously caused because of all the cuts we were getting from Russia, like they cut our gas supply, they've cut our electricity, would have mean that indirectly we are begging Russians to do something to us. But when
I see.
Play into their
independent
hands.
TV company
Yeah.
in 2001 was shut down by the security forces, in half an hour, literally half an hour after that, you got 15,000 people on the street in front of the TV station protecting freedom of speech. There is my answer. This is what people said is important for them. This is where they said they want freedom of speech, they care about these things. And this is not a nation where people just care about the bread. And where people will say that, okay, I don't care about my freedoms, my liberty, just give me a bread and I'm happy with that. It's not
They're
the
not
case.
selling out to the dominant groups.
Absolutely. Exactly the same happened last year.
So we'll try to, both Russia and the United States will try to ruin you. Drive you to your knees economically.
Actually,
Wouldn't you say? Is that what you're saying?
actually, nobody is ruining anybody. It's
No?
unfortunately, I'm not kind of a person who blames the others, who fingers on the others like, oh, because of you I suffer. I think its problem is mainly in us, because last year what happened in Georgia, when we finally grow up to that point that we said, okay, it's enough. You cannot steal one more elections from us. You cannot do it again to us. We did it without anybody. There
Yeah,
was no
that's
Russia,
right,
there
yes,
was no
yes.
United States, nobody. I mean, when it started, there was nobody. At a later stage, yes, our main problem was U.S. Embassy there when we were doing this revolution.
Yeah, of course.
U.S. ambassador who was going all the time on the secret meetings with our president. You had on news this U.S. ambassador meeting with the president and no message. I don't know what they spoke. Maybe he was telling nice things to him. I mean, nice things in terms of stop it and don't do it and you don't need to. I don't know, but there was no message. And Shevardnadze could manipulate all this. I mean, Shevardnadze went on TV one day and he said like, oh, my friends are there and United States government is supporting me and look, U.S. ambassador is here all the day and all this stuff. We knew it was not the case. We knew Richard Miles was telling him all things properly what should have been told. But I mean, if I go tomorrow on TV and I say, oh, you know, actually president is lying. I know that U.S. ambassador was telling him not to steal elections. Who would believe me? I mean, the first question is, how do you know? Were you there? There is the guy who was there sitting and who tells us that Richard Miles was supporting his policy. But we did not care. I mean, we just did it. We went on the streets and then it was clear for everybody, and even for Russians.
Now, how do you think that transpired? The idea of clarity of thought of the people in the manipulation of their lives by others. How do you think that occurred? Is it just part of the Georgian psyche or the Georgian knowledge or Georgian history? Because I think it happens all over and most people never figure it out until it's too late. So is it some uniqueness to Georgia, you think?
No, maybe, I don't think there is anything unique about my country. The only thing is that if you are stuck with a man for 35 years, with the same man, you just
You get
get to the point that it's enough, and you're just fed up with this man. And
yeah, that happens.
especially when he gets too, too
Greedy.
and out of context and
Yeah,
has
right,
no
right,
idea.
Well, I hope the
of
same
what's
doesn't happen
going
with
on.
Saakashvili, your new president, but I do congratulate you on behalf of and your country on achieving what I hope is now finally the right road to independence, true independence for the Georgian
Well,
people.
I hope it's the right road.
And please do come back anytime while you're
Yes,
still
I'd like
in
to
New
talk to you. When are
Haven.
you leaving town? When you go back?
I'm going back at end of December.
Yeah, I'd like to have you back on
Anytime
because I would
before-
like to talk to you more, raise it to another level of philosophical level of the idea, the universal,
Absolutely.
universal struggle of peoples over the dominant groups or dominant things. That's
I'll
what
be
I'm.
Dave is the real
That's what
I'm
philosopher of the
interested
two
in.
of us here.
No, but that's
the
what
two
I'm
hosts
interested in, that
of
kind of thing.
The
Because
Professors,
it's so hard.
broadcasting every Friday from 11 to noon on WNHU West Haven, 88.7 FM,
Okay.
and
Watch this.
rebroadcast
Watch him.
on
Watch his
Thursday
face now.
evenings.
Watch, here he goes. Watch, I'm showing him himself. Watch. Watch him, watch him.
at 9
Look at-
p.m. on CTV. The
You can't help
professors
it.
are David Morris, Professor of Marketing and International Business at the University of New Haven, and Joel Marks, yours truly, Professor of Philosophy at the University of New Haven. Our guest today has been Tinatin Khidasheli, who is president of the Georgian Young Lawyers Association
see.
and who has been a key figure in the recent so-called Velvet Revolution in the
Revolution of Roses.
excuse
We don't call
me.
it velvet.
All
Million,
right, the Revolution of Roses
Rose.
in the country of Georgia, and it's coming up to its first anniversary, and I'm sure there will be fireworks and celebration in the streets,
Absolutely.
as there were last November on that great occasion. And, the opinions and comments expressed on the professors are not necessarily those of the staff or management of the University of New Haven,
Or,
of WNHU,
or,
of Professor David Morris,
or,
of Professor Joel Marks,
or.
of anybody whatsoever. Thank you.
Isn't that great? Okay, ready? Come on, you got to take command here, and thank you very much.